Well, have they completed their alterations of the March Shuffle barns?
There's a couple.
Yeah. What did you hear from Eva? You know.
Good morning, everyone. How's the audio there? Good. I mentioned earlier, if you haven't got one there, 2 handouts on the back table there. One is key events in Israel's wilderness wanderings, and the other one is grasping the size of the Israelites in the wilderness. This is not that they were giants or anything, but the number of them. So this quarter we are doing responding to God's grace. Okay, good morning and welcome to all of you here. And I have been remiss in saying when I taught good morning to those of you on Zoom. So good morning to you and good morning to you on Zoom, YouTube. Of course, you could be listening any time of the day. So good day to you. All right, so we're going to get started, as I said, responding to God's grace, and today's lesson is faithful during uncertainty. This lesson and the next 3 lessons, we are going to be in the Pentateuch. Today, Exodus, 2 lessons in Numbers, and then a lesson in Deuteronomy. And the ones in Exodus and Deuteronomy are stories very familiar to us once we get into, oh yes, I know this story. And unfortunately, one of the key themes today in our lesson, complaints. Something we never do, right? Never complain. Never complain. So they have been in the land of Egypt. God's people have been in the land of Egypt. They were invited there by Joseph due to a famine in the land, so they lived there. And they were there. 70, 75 went in, and then over 600,000 men came out. So they grew into a nation while they were there. But, while they were there, they increased in size so large that the Pharaoh was worried, they're going to build their own army, take over. So they tried to decrease the size by throwing the male children into the river Nile, and that didn't work. But they complained about their tasks that they had to do, and God sent a deliverer, and then he messed things badly up for them. Now we have to gather our own straw. So they complained when God sends the deliverer. So this is part of our lesson. Generally, I take this out. I think Gordon does too, some of the introductory, but I thought this interesting. It's about Stephen Hawking, the eminent physicist and cosmologist, died March 14th. We know that it's Pi Day, right? Yeah. 3.14. And then interesting, he died at the age of 76. Well, so what? He had a good long life, didn't he? But at the age of 21, he was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and he was told he had about 2 to 5 years to live. He wouldn't make it out of his 20s. This is when he was 21. He had a goal. He wanted to complete his PhD in physics at Cambridge. Now, if you were told you had 2 to 5 years to live, would you spend that working on a PhD in physics? That's a lot of work, a lot of money, but he did and got his PhD. He lost his speech after an operation when he was 43 years old, so couldn't speak anymore. And he had that speech-generating device, which, you could hear him. It didn't sound like a natural voice, but you could hear him. He operated the device by using a hand switch, but later technology, he could use cheek muscle to control the device. There he is on the left. I've never seen him looking like that, but doesn't he look like a scientist? He doesn't have, the pens in his pocket or anything like typical engineer. But on the right, that's how I'm used to seeing him. And looking at pictures of him on the internet, in vast majority of the pictures, he's smiling. He had a good attitude despite, his situation. They asked him about coping with a disease, and he says, "It's a waste of time to be angry about my disability. One has to get on with life." Isn't that a good attitude? He says, "I haven't done badly. People won't have time for you if you're always angry or complaining." Well, that applies to anyone, right?
Yes. In Scotland, they say, "Hold your wheesht and get on with it." Oh, okay. And then if you're a visitor from the U.S., say, "What?" In spite of having many reasons to complain, he didn't complain. He just got on with life. Any of you read that book? I have a copy of it. Here's a review. The book was addictive despite being slightly difficult to read. I can confirm that. One review said it's a good book to read if you want to find out how dumb you are. Okay, once you understand an idea, you want to understand how it relates to other topics. But I noticed reading in the book that he had a sense of humor. He made some jokes in that book. Hawking has a quirky sense of humor. 9 million copies in print globally of a nonfiction, relatively difficult scientific book. He appeared on several TV shows, including comedies, Big Bang Theory, The Simpsons. He talks about The Simpsons. He would get there during the table reads. He would joke with the people, and they loved him on the show. So he didn't complain. He even made fun of himself, his speech on some of these shows. Most of us have fewer reasons to complain than Stephen Hawking did, but we still find ways to do it. Israelites, okay, we're getting our lessons, had just witnessed God deliver them from slavery in Egypt, and miraculously, with his power, going through the whole Red Sea, allowing them to pass through. Then when all of them had passed through, the waters came down and wiped out the Egyptian army that was pursuing them. So the Israelites still found reasons to complain, and let's see what happened to them. Can you imagine Moses having one of those? Complaint box? Man, it had been filled. They had some complaints. Okay, the people's accusation. Exodus 16, verses 1 through 3. Between Elim and, it's pronounced Sinai. But I'm going to pronounce it Sinai because that's how we always pronounce it, right? And it complains against Moses and against Aaron. So, bread from heaven. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and, I'm going to say Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they departed from the land of Egypt. So we're now at about 45 days after they left Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. So we see that I've highlighted, bolded the words all and whole. I'm wondering, is that literal or is that hyperbole? No. I spent the whole day yesterday working in the garage. Did you really? Well, 6 hours, that's the whole day. So, we do that. So they grumble against Moses and Aaron. Where were they? In the wilderness. Not that wilderness. That's too pretty. This wilderness. That wilderness. That last wilderness is the wilderness in which I went on my first backpacking trip. And it was a pretty nice wilderness. That's a Gila Wilderness in New Mexico. But here's where they are. This is the Sinai Wilderness. That's a pretty shot. Nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there, isn't it? So, if you know me, I have maps and I have pictures. My briefings. Lots of maps and lots of pictures. Now, point of this picture is some of these locations, they really don't know where they are. It's just a guess. Here we see Mara down here. And then on this one, Mara's way up there. So this is the one I'm going to use. Boy, it's a lot tinier when you look at it from here versus your computer screen. Okay, move over. Now, sometimes we don't realize, but Numbers and Exodus have some parallel passages. So this is one, talks about the journey. And you see in red I have highlighted, what were they doing? They were camping. I did some camping when I was younger. In about a week, I was ready for the camping to be over. I wanted to get home, get to my bed, and get to the food I want to, backpacking food is okay. You don't want to live on it. So they camped, and they set out. So 4.5 verses, and they're doing a lot of traveling here. They went a 3-day journey into the wilderness of Etham. That's way up there, close to where they were, and camped at Marah. That's down there. And they set out from Marah and they came to Elim. At Elim, it's sort of an oasis. There were 12 springs there and 70 palm trees, and they camped there. And then they set out from there, and then they camped by the Red Sea, which that portion is actually called the Gulf of Suez. And it is salt water, so you can't drink it. And camped in the wilderness of Sin, or wilderness of Sinai right there. And from there, they camped at Dovka, so up there. So a lot of traveling during this time. So they're going from Egypt, living in brick and mortar homes, out to camping all the time, setting up your camp, and then setting up, your place to live. Lots of tents there. They could have used probably Paul and Aquila and Priscilla there to fix their tents for them. So you notice there Goshen. That's where they're coming from. See how nice and green it is? And you see where they're going? So this is Pharaoh speaking to Joseph. He says, "The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen." So keep in mind, Goshen is a land of milk and honey. They're leaving one land of milk and honey for what God is telling them is a land flowing with milk and honey.
They're wondering if it's pie in the sky.
Yeah. I keep on thinking a land flowing with milk and honey must have a lot of flies, doesn't it? So there is Goshen, modern day Goshen. You can see a few cattle in there. That's what it looks like. Compare that to that wilderness. Talked about Elim. The oasis at Wadi Garandel is the #1 pick to be this Elim location. You see palm trees there in the spring. The second most popular is Ayun Musa, and as you see, that's the one where they take the tourists. Okay. And the people of Israel said to them, to Moses and Aaron, "Would that we have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by meat pots and ate the bread to the full. For you have brought us into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." You, Moses and Aaron, you brought us into this wilderness. 45 days out, they have fond memories of Egypt, don't they? Forget about the slavery. We had enough meat and bread. We could eat whatever we wanted. It would have been better if we died by the hand of the Lord while we were there than you bring us out here and kill us with hunger. Now I wondered about what does that mean, died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. We think, well, the Lord strikes them down. But sometimes when we're especially studying the book of Exodus, I like to look at Jewish commentaries. What do they have to say? And one of the most preeminent one is the JPS, the Jewish Publication Society Torah commentary. And it says, it gives a meaning, died by the hand of the Lord means died of natural causes, died of old age. So according to them, this means we'd rather have died of old age in slavery than die of starvation in freedom. So I got a timeline here. Issue, complaint, resolution. They did have some issues, didn't they? Slavery, they complained. Resolution was God sent a deliverer. Issue, we got to make bricks without straw. That's a complaint. That really didn't have a resolution until they got out. There were the plagues. So was the complaint a test? Can you complain correctly? Can you go from issue to resolution without the complaint? What if they hadn't complained? Was God proactive or reactive? Kind of wonder. And the complaints would have come first from the young, the elderly, and the weak would have been the ones complaining the first. Here's some passages from the New Testament. Do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear? They didn't have to worry about the what shall we wear, did they? Their clothes didn't wear out. For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows what you need, that you need all of them. And then we have here, ask, and it will be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and will be open to you. If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father who is in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So ask. But some people might say, well, Jesus here, he's talking about New Testament God, love, mercy. But they had Old Testament God, didn't they? Justice, harshness. Well, Jesus is talking about Old Testament God here. New Testament is not in place yet. So God's same yesterday, today, forever. So he's saying ask. Jesus is saying ask. So there's no problem asking if you do it in the right way. So issue, complaint, resolution versus issue, blame. That was bad. God didn't like that. He didn't like being blamed. He didn't like Moses being blamed. He didn't like Aaron being blamed. That got you a bad resolution. Versus issue, ask, resolution. That's the best. Okay. Ready for some questions? According to Exodus 16:1, it had been a whole year since the Lord had brought the Israelites out of Egypt. True or false? What? False? A month and a half, right? 45 days. The entire community was grumbling against Moses and Aaron. Shout it out. True. All right. We're on a roll here. The people said it had been better if they had died back in Egypt. True. The Israelites complained about how poor they were in Egypt and how little food they had to eat there. No, Egypt was a land of plenty. How can we discern when or to what extent it is appropriate to express dissatisfaction with our circumstances? Is it okay to express dissatisfaction with our circumstances?
I think so.
Yeah. If you don't express any dissatisfaction, you may not have anything, you may not do anything, Go back to the book of Judges. They did the evil in the sight of the Lord. They worshiped false gods. They cried out to the Lord. What did the Lord do? Sends a deliverer, a judge. That went on and on and on till they got to the fifth judge, Gideon. And after Gideon, they were bad again. We had Abimelech. And then God sent, tormentors to them. They stopped crying out to the Lord. They learned to live in their misery. So they no longer expressed dissatisfaction, but God still sent deliverers. Okay, in addition to Exodus 2:23 through 25, look at some of the other ones. The Exodus, 2:23. Is that the one that fell? Yeah, that's the one that fell. Exodus 2:23. This is complaining in the land of Egypt. During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery, and they cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. And how did God respond? And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob. And God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Now contrast that with Numbers 11, 1 through 3. And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord. Moses interceded for the people, and the fire died down. So the name of that place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. So there's some other ones here. I'll just go to 1 Peter 5:7. It says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you." So there are proper ways of doing these complaints. But does God ever... Well, we know God handles complaints, but you got to... What is the proper way of doing the complaint? God has a procedure set up. We'll look at an example. There are two of them like this, but we're going to look at this one. The daughters of Zelophehad. You know that one? So, this is from Numbers chapter 27. Then drew near the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, from the clans of Manasseh, and the son of Joseph. So these daughters of Zelophehad are from the tribe of Joseph, Manasseh. And the names of the daughters were Mahlah, Noah, that's kind of interesting, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. So 5 daughters, they had a complaint. And they stood before Moses, before Eleazar the priest, and before the chiefs, and before all the congregation at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Moses, who's Eleazar? Moses has died in Numbers 27. Eleazar is the son of Aaron. Nadab and Abihu have died, so he's the third son, the living son. So he is now high priest. And these 5 daughters are standing before Moses, before Eleazar, before all the chiefs, and all the congregation. Does that mean 2.5 million people? Probably not that much. But wouldn't you be scared doing that? What if God doesn't handle your complaint the way you want? So why are they doing this? Go back to Exodus. After they leave, Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, sees how Moses is handling things, and he is judging all the people himself, judging big complaints, small complaints. Jethro saying, what you're doing isn't good. So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he said. Moses chose able men out of Israel and made them heads over the people, chiefs of hundreds, thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s, and they judged the people at all times. Any hard case they brought to Moses, but any small matter they decided. So what does that tell us? This is a big case. They're bringing it to Moses. They're bringing it to the high priest and everything here. So a big case. So here's their complaint. Our father, Zelophehad, he was not among the company of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah, that's Korah's rebellion, but died of his own sin, and he had no sons. So he had 5 daughters, no sons. Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers. They didn't think this was fair. Now, Gordon, I don't know, was this still going on in England? Any of you read Pride and Prejudice? 5 daughters could not inherit their father's property because they were women. So apparently that was still going on early 19th century. So that is their request. That's a demand, imperative. Give us a possession among our father's brothers. They're bringing this case to Moses. So what does Moses do? He passed the buck. He says, I can't decide this. Moses brought their case before the Lord. Okay, what is the Lord going to do? Boy, those impertinent women, how dare they do that? I've set this up. And the Lord said to Moses, the daughters of Zelophehad are right. You shall give them possession of an inheritance among their father's brothers and transfer the inheritance of their father to them. And you shall speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall transfer his inheritance to his daughter. And if he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. Now that last part, that's what was going to happen. If they hadn't complained, their father's property would have went to their uncles. They would have gotten nothing. But now it goes to them. So this is it. If a man has no son, it goes to his daughter. And that last thing, that's one of those 613 commandments you hear about. So that's how that would have happened.
That still happens today.
It still does?
Yes, it does.
Goes to the, yeah, imagine in some countries. In the United States? Wow. Okay, there is one more incident like this where the people complained. It's in Numbers chapter 9. That's, taking of the Passover. In order to partake of the Passover, you had to be ritually pure. And some people had, due to no fault of their own, they'd been in contact with a dead body or something, and they were no longer pure to take the Passover, and they complained. It says, why do we have to miss out on the Passover? The Lord takes it to God, and God says, they're right. And on the first day, 14th day of the first month is when the Passover is, but if you were ritually unpure, you can take it on the 14th day of the second month. So this is the second case where a complaint resulted in having the law amended or changed. So the Lord's answer. I forgot, what was the question? Okay, the Lord's answer to, why are you starving us in the wilderness? Okay. Revealed to Moses, Moses relays it to the people. But why didn't the Lord himself reveal the answer to the people? The people didn't want him to. This is a little bit later, 4 chapters later. This is at Mount Sinai. Now when all the people saw the thunder and flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off and said to Moses, you speak to us, we will listen, but do not let God speak to us lest we die. They were afraid to have God speak to them, so Moses always had to act as an intermediary between God and the people. So Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you. Whoa, I would... Wait a minute, don't fear because God has come to test me? That the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. The people stood far off while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. So they were afraid. They didn't want God to speak to them, and God complied and let Moses be the intermediary. Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you. That's generally not how we get bread, is it? Get it from, the grain. And the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my law or not. So he's testing them beforehand. The law doesn't come until chapter 20 there at Mount Sinai. They're not there yet. So this is sort of a pre-test. They'll test you. Sometimes when they put up a traffic light where you haven't had a traffic light before, they'll have it blinking red and the other side blinking yellow, just to get you used to it. So you're used to that traffic light, so that's a test. So here he's testing them on this one issue, where afterwards, if they disobey it, it means death. But now he's just going to get mad at them. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, this bread from heaven, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, at evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Well, hopefully they already knew that, didn't they? And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you should grumble against us? We're not in charge here. We can't give you any food. So the grumbling here, here's a couple of passages. This is while they were still in Egypt. It shows they were grumbling there, and shows that God is putting up with it here. They're not grumbling against God. It says, I have heard their cry, and because of I know their sufferings. I have remembered my covenant. So it was okay while they were doing this in Egypt. They weren't grumbling against God. They were grumbling against their condition. So why are you grumbling against us? And Moses said, when the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him, But what are we? Your grumbling is not against us but against the Lord. Is there a lot of grumbling going on here? 5 times in 2 verses. In case you're wondering, there's more mentions of grumbling in Exodus and Numbers than in the rest of the Bible put together. That doesn't mean they grumble, it's not there in Judges, and they don't grumble, they cry out to the Lord. So, meat to eat. Yeah, they talked about the pots of meat there. So, meat to eat. Didn't the Israelites already have meat? Let's go back to Exodus. This is the departure. And the people of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. So your handout there estimates, if you count the women and children, maybe 2 million, 2.5 million. A mixed multitude. So there were other people besides Israelites. We'll get into that a little bit later. And they went up with them a very much livestock, both flocks and herds. So cattle, sheep, goats. So large amount. Let's go back to this Jewish commentary. Since the people left Egypt with their flocks and herds, they could hardly have been in danger of starvation. With regard to meat, that is. However, livestock is the most valuable possession of a pastoralist who can seldom be induced to part with an animal. How was Job's wealth measured? Wasn't it livestock? Livestock, how much livestock? Seldom can be induced to part with an animal. Remember David talking to Saul, going up against Goliath? He said, when a lion or a bear tried to get one of his sheep, what did he do? He went after lions and bears to go after sheep. Jesus said, I'm a good shepherd. I'm the good shepherd. A good shepherd lays down his life for his flock. The story of the 99, the sheep, once the shepherd has lost one, he leaves the 99. Once he finds the sheep, he puts it on his shoulder, carries the sheep home. So they were very precious. Okay, besides the people had probably already suffered losses for lack of adequate pasturage. As far as I know, pasturage for the sheep and the goats is never mentioned. Did they lose because of inadequate pasturage out there? So who complained about not having meat? You see where he's looking up his master. Can I have the burger, please? Can I have it? Okay, so this is who complained. We're going to go to Numbers. Now the rabble that was among them, that's that assorted flock, had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept and said, oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. I've got to be honest, my perception on this verse changed after going on a trip to Europe with Candy. Now, did we complain? Oh, yes. There was talk of the food on the bus. I don't recall any of it being complimentary. I got to tell you one story. This couple, besides the kids, there were some adults that went along. And the tour provided breakfast and dinner. We could split for lunch where we were going to go. And this couple found this restaurant. They were amazed. They found iced tea on the menu. Emphasis on ice. They ordered the iced tea. Couldn't wait. We're going to get iced tea. The waiter brought them 2 plastic bottles, room temperature of Lipton iced tea. Another surprise was we went in this place like Luby's, I think, whatever, and you get your train, you went through, and they had like chopped steak. I was toward the end of the line, they went through, and then I noticed some of them were going back up. I said, wait a minute, they're not getting seconds already, are they? Well, they were aghast when they went back to their table, sat down, looked at their plate, and their steak was sitting literally in a pool of blood. They didn't know that American teenagers don't want their steak bloody rare. So at least they were nice, and they recooked them. They cooked them for them. So at least that was good. I think we were the first group that went through in early June, and hopefully they learned a lesson. Don't serve American teenagers bloody rare steak. So
I went, my first experience of American food was in New York. I was on my way to Lubbock, Texas, and I went to get a hamburger. The guy says, do you want a tomato on that? I said, yes, sir. He says, that'll be 10 cents. Do you want onion? I said, 10 cents. He says, you got it. I just had the burger and the bread.
yeah. Well, I went once and got a pizza, and I ordered, I said, a pepperoni, and they came back and they said, did you want cheese on the pizza? And I said, yes. Why? Is that an ingredient? They said, yes, that's an ingredient. I had to pay extra if you want cheese on the pizza. But I got to admit, on this trip, around day 7, I had a craving for peanut butter so bad. I was thinking, I would give 20 euros for a peanut butter sandwich.
Smooth or crunchy?
I don't care. But then later I look, what does a peanut butter craving indicate? It said a deficiency in healthy fats in your diet. So generally, if you're craving a food, you have a deficiency in something in your diet. So they had, what, manna and quail. Well, hopefully that manna had some fiber. Maybe their problem is congestion or something like that, you know? Okay, so you got this as a handout. This is some of the size of that. Excess of 30 boxcars of food, 30 tank cars of water per day. But a lot of things to cover, you know. But I'm sure God knew that, you know, Jesus said if you're going to build a tower, you got to count the cost. If you're going to transfer 2 million people from one location to the other, there's a cost associated. Okay, identify the following as true or false. 5 more minutes. God used his provision of bread as a test of the people's obedience. True. So, God instructed them that on the 7th day they were to take in twice as much. False. On the 6th day. So what happens if on the 5th day say, oh, I don't want to go out again, I'm going to get a lot more? It went bad.
It went moldy.
It went moldy. I remember there's a sign at a chow hall, military chow hall. It says, take all you want, but eat all you take. Have you seen a sign like that? Take all you want, but eat all you take. God instructed them, okay, so that would be a false. The Lord promised to give them meat in the evening and bread in the morning. True? The people were blaming Moses and Aaron for their troubles when they should have been talking to God. Or at least respectfully talking to Moses about it. What are some ways the church can become a vehicle for revealing the Lord's glory to those who are in difficult circumstances? Love one another.
Take care of those in need. Why is it important to do so? Because, we're the light of the world.
Well, on a practical side, the church, not just this church or congregation, but so many struggle with when people are hungry, when people are in dire circumstances, do you just shower them or give them more than they need? Or after a while, should we be thinking about what we can do to not enable them, but to teach them? Give a man a fish, that's fine. But if you teach a man to fish, that's a whole lot better. You become part of the solution to your own problem.
Yeah, I've heard that. Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, he's sitting in a boat drinking beer all day, right? Okay, the people look, and Moses listens. Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole congregation, large of people, come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. Or remember, all the time, there was the cloud above the tabernacle during the day, and then the pillar of fire. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard their grumbling. Again, we got grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. You know for sure. God provides in uncertain times. Yes, they even have snow in the desert. Moses spoke directly to the people and told them to come near because God had heard them. He had Aaron speak to them. The glory of the Lord appeared to the people. Yes, that's true. Careful on this one. God said that he was upset with the people for murmuring and complaining. God spoke directly to the people, promising to give them meat and bread to show that he was the Lord. He spoke to Moses. Meat for the people, manna for the people. In the evening, quail came up and covered the camp. In the morning, dew lay around the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-looking thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is bread from the Lord that the Lord has given you to eat. When you serve somebody some food and they look down and they say, what is it? What do you think?
It's a plate of manna.
Yeah. It's a plate of manna. Hopefully high in vitamins and minerals and fiber.
And
So-
there is an indication that it was a resin.
Like honey wafer. Yeah, I like honey grams, honey graham crackers. I wonder if it was like that. So they cooked it, I think. Different ways to prepare it. So what is it? It was manna. There were just a few quails, but it was enough to feed everyone. Yeah, the whole camp was covered with them. The people called the small flakes manna because they did not know what they were. It's true. A lifestyle of grumbling results from failing to be grateful for what one has and a failure to recognize the source of those blessings. Like Israel, we start listening to our desires and influences around us. We can find ourselves believing that we are victims of God rather than victors, enjoying victories that are won by God. So next week is Numbers 13 and 14. This is sending out the 12 to scout out the land. So your handout for this week also covers next week. And then next week there will also be a handout on the book of Numbers.
Thanks, Warren.
All right. My papers are gone with the wind. don't know. It's a good question.